I think it was a disgraceful performance, and I think it should never be permitted to happen again.
That is very good.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Cricket Podcast. We're covering two IPL matches today. The one between Punjab Kings and Mumbai Indians, and the match from yesterday, the Rajasthan Royals taking on Royal challengers Bangalore. There are too many Kings and Royal this and Royal that in this tournament. Just that intro alone, three of them. Ridiculous. I'm Jack Hope. I'm here with Ross Legg, as usual. Ross, how you doing?
I'm okay, mate. I'm okay.
And a very scary-looking Dan Weston. How are you doing, Dan?
I am buoyant with my boys RCB at the top of the table, and this face mask is now going on my head, and it will remain there. It will remain there until my boys at RCB are usurped from the perch at the top of the table.
So I reckon your wife's going to get a little bit annoyed at that, but there we go.
Yeah, right.
Oh, no.
Right, fellas. Before we get into the show, Ross, as usual, I'm going to ask you to give some messages to our listeners and viewers.
Mm-hmm. We are now sponsored by Woodstock Cricket. So if you want cricket and gear, go to their website. Jack's got his cricket bat behind him that he's not going to demonstrate because this clearly is a tin pot organisation. Us, not Woodstock. You should follow us at The Cricket Pod on Twitter and Instagram, and you should like and subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on any podcast platform you listen to us on. Thank you ever so much for listening. We love having you. Put your comments in the live chat, and we will get to your super chats and whatever else throughout the show.
Absolutely. And, you know, if you want to show a little bit more support for the podcast, you can join our YouTube channel from as little as £1 a month with a couple of higher tiers if you really like it. Or head over to Patreon where we get a slightly better deal. So, you know, that's where you should go. Ross, on the topic of Woodstock, you used your new bat for the first time yesterday. What happened?
I haven't really locked it in too well. And that could be the sign of a bad story. But actually, the first two balls of the first two scoring shots, and Dan, you're like this, I hit 12 runs.
Fantastic. Intent.
So that is intent. I think I hit about a 20 ball 50 yesterday. So I'm pretty buoyant right now. Yeah,
it was good. And you're off on holiday. Where are you off on holiday?
I'm going to St Ives, and unfortunately, it doesn't have a famous cricket ground in St Ives that has got a tourist attraction like the likes of Rajasthan or kind of Delhi Capital's Toilet Museum. So we'll see what I can find down there, and I'll report back.
Right then, boys, let's talk about the cricket. Let's talk about today's cricket first. So Punjab, they took on Mumbai, and it didn't quite go to the pre-tournament script, did it, Ross?
No, I think it was a really interesting game. So this was Mumbai's last game at the Chepauk, and I think they cannot wait to get away from there. They were stuck in after losing the toss, and they crawled on the floor through the power play and never truly recovered. Rohit carried the batting side. Sky contributed somewhat, but their heavy artillery from last year's IPL more resembled kind of meek water pistols, and they only posted 131. Because the return of Ravi Bishnoi proved to be a smart one. We'd only been talking about him for the whole of our IPL coverage, and finally he was there making things happen. The Kings were then ruthlessly boring with their batting performance as KL Rahul, king stat padder that he is, carried his bat, accompanied well by Agarwal and then Chris Gale, who showed all their experience to win by 9 wickets in what was probably one of the most comfortable victories over Mumbai Indians you'll ever see.
Yeah, I've seen a great comment already from Rickon. Could Mumbai Indians and Punjab have made that game any more boring? Dan, I'm going to go with you to kick it off. There must have been some interesting things that happened in this match.
No, it was Chepauk. Nothing interesting happens at Chepauk apart from match-losing innings, and there was plenty of them on the Mumbai team today. I don't know whether those innings from Rohit and Suryakumar Yadav were match-losing innings in terms of like putting pressure on other players, but I think we can say that 6 off 17 balls from Ishan Kishan probably wasn't his finest moment. I think it was crowned by, I think it was his second or third ball. Hardik Pandya meekly offered a little jab outside off stump with about 10 balls remaining of the match. And it was like, do they actually realise that they have to put a total on the board? Or they're just completely mystified by the Chennai pitch? I don't know, but wasn't great.
It is really weird, isn't it, Ross? The way they batted today. Because we've seen them, in their first 4 matches of the tournament. They've not been like all singing, all dancing Mumbai Indians from last year, but they've had like spells where they look really dominant, and they've had players that have come through with big moments with the bat and big moments with the ball. But today it looked like they just had no answers, and they were like, we were going through the motions. We were like, what do we have to do? Play one more game here, then we can head off somewhere where we can play our game. Have they given up a little bit in terms of playing in Chennai?
So I think it does get to the point where the bowlers can only win you so many games in this kind of bit. So I think they've played the 5 games now, and actually their bowlers have got them out of trouble. They haven't really dominated with the bat as we've known Mumbai Indians to do so. And it's quite interesting to see how we tried to figure out whether the likes of Ishan Kishan, Sky, Quinton de Kock as well, who has struggled, could actually adapt to this pitch. And it kind of shows that the pitches in T20, in any cricket, makes such a massive difference. What I do find interesting is that they have kind of a reticence to change their batting lineup and kind of to change or even to change their batters who are actually selected. So we saw Pollard kind of moved up and down, Pandya moved up and down. But actually, Chris Lynn hit nearly a 50, I think it was 49 in the first game, did run out Rohit Sharma, but actually it might have looked scratchy, but actually he found a way to hit runs at Chennai. And I'm actually a little bit surprised they didn't give him another opportunity over the next 4 games to actually do something when Quinton de Kock has actually looked all at sea. And regardless of how big a name you are, sometimes it's about trying to get you that extra 20, that extra 30 runs in there. And it's just a little bit surprising for me for such a well-run franchise.
Yeah, maybe. That could be a fair point. I mean, I think probably one of the other problems is that Ishan Kishan is bad now. He, for the tournament, is averaging 14 at a strike rate of 80. Dan, obviously I'm being a little bit facetious when I say he's bad, but this is quite a severe, poor run at this point, isn't it? Or maybe on the other hand, maybe this is just sort of par for the course, the kind of player he is. Do you want to enlighten us on that?
I don't think it's par for the course of the player that he is, because he's always been like quite an intent machine. He's been aggressive from the start, and intent machines don't score 6 or 17 balls. We saw at the lower level that he's inside Mushtaq Ali Trophy when he was younger. His numbers were superb. He's one of the few players, him, Padikkal, who all struck, I think, over 500 runs in a season at 150 plus strike rate by the age of 22. That's a rare achievement. We'll talk a bit later about Devdutt Padikkal, I'm sure, in some detail. But no, he's always been a good player. He's young players do have some peaks and troughs for sure, but there's no reason as to why he's currently doing this. And the only thing I can think of is he spent too much time with a few players in the Indian national team set up recently, having just got his first call up.
I mean, that is possible. I think we've seen it with a couple of other players. People always say KL Rahul was a more aggressive player until he started playing for India. And to some extent, we might have seen it with Rishabh Pant after his first stint with the India side, where it didn't quite click for him. And I think, some of the senior leadership in that India team maybe wanted him to be a little bit more consistent. But it is hard to be consistent if, to use your phrase, Dan, if you are an intent machine, because intent machines are taking a lot of risk. That's what intent is in a sense, isn't it? It's calculated risk. I think that's enough on Mumbai's batting. I expect they'll bounce back when they get to a slightly more favourable surface. They're obviously not out the tournament. 2 wins from 5? I think they can win 6 of their last 9 matches. Don't you two boys?
Yeah, and I think on that Ishan Kishan point, I think you'll see just the change that you saw last year. They were so dominant at the Wankhede Stadium, and actually going to Delhi, like Delhi is a little bit more kind of pace. The pace comes onto the ball a little bit better than Chennai. I think anywhere does really. I think there's a house near me that's been demolished, and actually it will play. The ball would come on nicer through the brickwork at the bottom than anything else. But I think we'll see them bounce back, and I see the likes of Pandya, like Hardik Pandya, like form is temporary, class is permanent, and I can soon see them kind of bouncing back into this tournament. What I was impressed with today, though, was kind of Punjab Kings. They've been so weird in this tournament, and almost they've gone from like disgracing themselves to then looking like they actually had a bit of a plan of how to play at Chennai. I mean, did you see Moises Henriquez opening the batting? And I mean, it follows Delhi Capital's suit of
Opening the
picking
bowling.
another. Yeah, opening the bowling. Sorry, I've made the same mistake as you. But he opened the bowler just like Marcus Stoinis did, and it worked for Marcus Stoinis. And they were just like, "Well, we've got a budget, Marcus Stoinis. Maybe it'll work for us." And it did today.
Yeah, it did. I still think that was a bit curious, and I think Mumbai possibly missed the trick, not taking him on a little bit more. And they were talking on. They obviously had someone who was pretty quick on the analysis at Star Sports or whoever does the broadcasting, because they did highlight that Rohit struggles for some reason against the deliveries bowled around 120 kph, which is about the speed that Moises Henriquez was bowling. Now, I think there's probably a bit of a caveat to that, because a lot of the balls that you face that are 120 kph will be slower balls. They're not just going to be a stock delivery from whoever it is. So Rohit might just have an issue with timing, change-ups, basically. But I wanted to ask you, Dan, do you think that decision to open the bowling with Henriquez was possibly data-driven, or I guess what I'm asking is, can you explain Punjab Kings' bowling selection?
Well, I can't, but maybe they got it right on this occasion. I think that they definitely went in with a bowler too short. Was it the last match that they played where it was just like 3 frontline bowlers, and then they had, well, this is pretty much the same as today with Allen, Huda, and Henriquez, who are not regular 4-over bowlers whatsoever. But they went with Bishnoi today over Ashwin, which is, well, I mean, like, obviously we've been crying out for that for the entire tournament so far. I mean, I don't understand how anyone could think that M. Ashwin is a better bowler than Bishnoi, basically, and certainly Bishnoi's got an absolute ton more potential. Data-driven, well, perhaps, yeah. Some teams are getting smarter than others, but I wouldn't necessarily have put Kings 11 in that bracket in advance of this match. But then Huda was a good pick for a matchup as well against de Kock, because he struggles a bit against spin as well, and he's sort of off spin against the left-hander as well. So there was probably a bit of logic there as well. So you can kind of understand it. I think Kishan, another left-hander as well. So it was quite good to burn some Huda overs to start with, at least.
Cool. Let's flip it over to the Punjab Kings chase then. I mean, obviously they won this by 9 wickets, so it was pretty easy. It kind of suited KL Rahul today, didn't it, Ross? In that you could just bat on and there was no pressure really to score particularly quickly.
Yeah, I think 130 was never going to be enough. Even like a KKR kind of a collapse that we saw the other day, that wasn't going to happen in this situation. I think the experience that they have at the top of the order is useful in this scenario, and this is a perfect opportunity for KL Rahul, as you say. Like, he hit 50 off a 50 ball today. In any other T20 game, like if you're chasing 160, if you're setting a total, that has probably lost you the game. But actually, in this scenario, they had the freedom to do that. And when you have someone like Chris Gale, I mean, even Agarwal at the other end, a more explosive batsman than he is, and I thought they played it perfectly today. On the commentary, they were really trying to get you to buy into, this is going to be such a close game, the narrative's going to twist. I genuinely thought it was a walk in the park for Punjab Kings, and I thought it was a really clinical performance from them that as we've kind of been waiting for, actually.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. At no point did I think that there was a realistic chance of Mumbai winning, or at least after sort of the power play, because they got off to a pretty decent start. And from there, it was a foregone conclusion. They just sort of took their time, went about it reasonably sensibly. We did have a question from Twitter, and I think this leads on to maybe a more interesting conversation. This was from Prax. He asked, how can Bumrah and Chahar be so good at bowling, but so bad at fielding? I always wonder, and I think we might have talked about this before, Dan, how much fielding really matters. I mean, I'm presuming here that the fielding ability of Jasprit Bumrah and Rahul Chahar is virtually irrelevant compared to their bowling ability. And like they could literally be two breeze blocks just stood on the boundary, but they'd be valuable to the team because their bowling talent is so high. Is that right?
Yeah, completely spot on in my opinion. So there's been a few people who have tried to quantify the effect of fielding good and bad fielders, and I think there was only a couple of players who were on average +1 per fielding innings than compared to the entire player pool. So if the best fielders are between 1 and 2 runs saved per innings, then it's pretty safe to assume that the worst fielders are pretty similar in a negative way. So if you're only costing your team 1 or 2 runs per innings when you're fielding and you're Jasprit Bumrah, then it doesn't matter because you're saving them about 10 runs an innings with the ball. So yeah, it doesn't really matter. Like you say, it could be breeze blocks and it wouldn't really change anything. And I think that's something that they found in baseball as well, was that fielding was overrated compared to other outputs. And it kind of goes a bit against the what I call conventional wisdom from coaches, in that like they really hate fielders who are bad, basically, and I think they overvalue the effect of a bad fielder when actually it's pretty negligible.
Yeah, I suspect, similar to baseball actually, that there are positions where being good at fielding is extremely useful. So first slip in a test match, for instance, might be an example. I know in baseball, if you're the catcher, so effectively baseball's version of a wicketkeeper, being good at that is worth a lot to a baseball team. But yeah, if you're fielding at first base, like probably 1 and 3 of us could do it after a couple of months training. There's a couple more selection-based questions on this match, and then we'll move on, I think. So, Ross, one for you. Should Mumbai Indians consider dropping Ishan Krunal or Quinton de Kock? That's from Gaurav on Twitter.
Well, Vic London's put in one of the super chats saying that the Mumbai Indians team looks kind of past their glory with several batting issues. So to answer both of these things, I think when you've got a championship side, or almost any side, you need to kind of keep it fresh. Like you talk about Alex Ferguson, regardless if you like Man United or not, tried to keep it fresh in competition for places, etc. And actually having the likes of Chris Lynn around that side, I mean, they bought Jimmy Neesham in, which is a bit of a waste of money. They should have bought someone probably a little bit better to offer a bit more competition. But competition for places is really healthy in an elite sports side because it keeps people's levels of performance up. And I just think that they should try to mix things up. I'm really surprised they didn't even attempt to adapt their strategy for Chennai when clearly it wasn't going to work every single game. And I think they probably could have got. Well, they were lucky to a certain extent that the games were quite close anyway. So yeah, I think some rotation would have been welcome here, but we'll see what happens in the next game in Delhi.
And then one for you, Dan, which comes in from Vinay. And basically, it's about Jai Richardson. Why are they paying him so much to sit on the bench? Does it make sense in Chennai, maybe, or what's happening there?
That's a good question. To be honest with you, I'm not entirely sure. Obviously, I'm not privy to their selection decisions, and obviously, we can kind of ask the same question about Riley Meredith as well with Punjab Kings. I keep calling them Kings 11, but obviously, yeah, Punjab Kings. We've all done that. Yeah, I don't know. I don't like it because to me it kind of makes me think that they're just playing 50. Was it you? Another podcast said 52 card pickup with their team, basically.
It was me.
Yeah. I get that, and it's like they're losing matches. They keep changing the team. Sunrisers Hyderabad doing exactly the same thing, and it just makes me think that they just don't really have a clue what their best team is, and they're just kind of just making random changes and having completely different combos and team structures in order to like somehow find this magic blend which is probably largely going to be variance driven rather than process driven anyway. So no, I don't understand why Jai Richardson's not playing. I think it's fair to say that the Big Bash is a considerable quality gap to the IPL, but I still think that he should be good enough to play in the IPL as an overseas player, and I think that they've dropped him pretty harshly. And yeah, I don't like the Kings 11 Punjab Kings bowling choices at all, and I think I'm not even that convinced about Mohammad Shami, to be honest with you. If you look at his death numbers and power play numbers over recent years, they're not great. And one day, just one day, maybe they might play Ishan Perel at some stage too.
We'll see. It's interesting you talk about the Big Bash there, because we have heard from from a current cricketer, a very good English opener who's not at the IPL, who basically says the standard of the Big Bash when you're playing there is unbelievably poor. And the grounds are huge, the wickets are often bad, and that bowlers can make a career with a few performances there, but it just doesn't translate elsewhere. In his view, you're better off at looking at the Blast for quality players. He thinks it's a harder environment to bowl in. I'm not 100% sure that data analysis would necessarily bear that out, but I think there's probably something. It does bear that out. Okay, well there we are.
Yeah, it does.
Don't trust random Australia death bowlers if you're an IPL franchise. Shall we move on to the second game? So we talked about that one. I think we got a lot of content out of a pretty dross match, to be honest. Well done, lads. Pat ourselves on the back. I am going to give a quick summary of this, and I can take this T-shirt off because we've done the Mumbai bit. I've got to do something, haven't I? Ross, Dan's got a bandana on his head and numbers. Ross, you've got the pink cap and hating Virat Kohli and KL Rahul. What have I got? I could take my shirt off. That's.
I mean, the Free the Nip movement has got your name written all over it, mate. So bring it on.
Right. So yesterday, Rajasthan Royals took on Devdutt Padikkal, and Devdutt Padikkal won easily. Or to look at it another way, the best team in the 2021 IPL took on the worst team in the 2021 IPL, and the result we sort of expected came to pass. Even though the best team in this case was RCB, the RCB factor couldn't get in the way of the inevitability of this match. To sum it up then, Rajasthan, they batted first, and I use the word batted reasonably loosely as their big guns at the top of the order all failed to fire, or mostly failed to fire, leaving them 43 for 4 at one point. However, things took a little bit of an unexpected turn, certainly as far as this podcast is concerned, as Shivan Dubey, of all people, led the recovery before Tuatia came in to party like it was IPL 2020 and smashed the Royals up to 177. Obviously, at the Wankhede Stadium, it wasn't amazing. That score, it was very chaseable, and that sort of proved to be the case. But at least they scored enough runs that we got to see one of the most special innings of the tournament so far. Probably up there with Sanju Samson, I think. Except that in this case, it was in a winning cause. I am, of course, talking about the Devdutt Padikkal show. 101 of 51 balls. Pretty good. Rajasthan, of course, they finished themselves off in style by bowling 5 wides to lose by 10 wickets with 21 balls to spare. That was a pounding, Ross, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's really difficult even to try. It was the Western Leg Derby, as it was coined on Twitter, and I said I'm going to have to put an impassioned defence up over trying to protect a 10-wicket win. And I mean, ladies and gentlemen, there you go. That is a sight. We should have auctioned this off, Jack. This is free nudity on the show. And I think from a Rajasthan Royals point of view, it's just disheartening, isn't it? They've already lost some of their best players. And regardless if you think Ben Stokes is better or worse, Jack, I still think it's a huge impact on them. Liam Livingstone obviously went home this week as well. And they're just looking like a side who they're going into every game not knowing they're beaten. And I think it was great that they've got someone like Chris Morris and Tuatia played well to get them up to kind of at least a respectable score. I mean, it's at least 20 below, probably 30 below par. Dad, I think it's quite interesting to see the different approaches that were put in there. I mean, the top order collapse for Rajasthan is that because there's just so much pressure on Joss Buttler to carry the rest of that side? I mean, even Sampson's approach is Sampson's going to Sampson, right? He's going to do what he does. Well, what are your thoughts on that, and how do we think they can kind of shift to maybe be a little bit more competitive in this space?
Wait for the mega auction. I mean, we've said this again before. What is the definition of insanity? It's doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. It honestly, it just blows my mind how these teams can get away with making so many mistakes. Well, they don't get away with it in terms of results, but they get away with it in terms of like not being relegated or anything like that. Honestly, it's incredible. I mean, we spoke about Mananvora recently. I mean, what's he done to justify an opening role in his career in the IPL right now? I'm not sure he's even done enough to justify an opening role inside Mushtaq Ali trophies, let alone the IPL. Miller is a below-average overseas player. I'm not sure that the new recruit Rassi van der Dussen, I mean, if I got a free pick on any overseas batter, it would not be Rassi van der Dussen. I mean, I don't think he's a bad player, but there's far better players, in my opinion, who could have done a better job than that.
So on that point, Dan, do you actually think that there is that pull? So I genuinely think there's only a couple of people who are actually willing to go into the bubble now because of the situation in India, which doesn't get talked about at all on the commentary. It doesn't get covered at all by kind of some of the things that you read. So it's a pretty serious case, and people kind of going, "Oh, Alex Hale should turn up." Even in the live chat here, I think Parth is suggesting that Adil Rashid gets drafted in for Archer. There's just people, they're not willing to go into that environment now.
Yeah, maybe that's pretty fair. Yeah, that's a fair challenge, I think. But I mean, I'm sure that there's some players who definitely would be willing to go, and someone like Ramana Garbaz, who I've spoken about so many times before, is this kid's got ultra high potential. He's just a complete six-hitting, boundary-hitting machine. He keeps wicket and he opens a batting. Could you just see he's got a perfect slot alongside Butler at the top of the order? But I'm sure he'd have been willing to travel. But yeah, I just don't think that the IPL teams like think outside the box very often with their recruitment. I think they think, well, he's played international cricket recently. He's done okay recently. Oh, let's go for him. And it's just lazy, I think, most of the time. I mean, we talk about the COVID situation as well. And yes, that is problematic, of course. But it's not like they haven't done the same thing for the last 10 years. Do you know what I mean? Like it's not a new phenomenon that IPL teams make bad recruitment decisions.
I do think with Rajasthan, they were a little bit unlucky with the Archer situation. And then, I don't absolutely love Stokes, but him going home, they obviously had an idea about how they were going to structure their team. So they've lost who they thought was going to open the batting for all 14 matches. They've lost who they thought would be their best bowler for all 14 matches. And that, I mean, that's 20%. That's maybe the best 20% of their team, or certainly the best 10% of their team's gone home. Or never turned up. So I think they're a little bit unlucky there. Let's talk about maybe one or two of the positives with Rajasthan, and then we'll talk about Padikkal for a while.
I've got one more thing
that
I need to raise. Why is Mananvora playing at the top of the order for Rajasthan Royals? It makes no sense to me. The guy you mentioned it last time, Jack. That he's played over 50 times in the IPL. He has had every opportunity he possibly could have done to prove that he isn't shit, and he's just shit. There's no other way to describe it. It's an opening batsman in IPL.
Yeah, no. Look,
Dan, looks like you're about to say something.
I can't say about like the definition of insanity. Right, last year Rajasthan Royals frequently lost 3+ power play wickets. Their power play balls per dismissal figures were horrendous last year. And they think that's a problem that surely a post-tournament report would have identified. Who on earth would have thought, I know how we can fix that? We'll pick Mananvora.
and even the chats and our solution. I mean, Pritham Sai raised it, saying that should Jaiswal be in the side, and actually the upside of him could actually be far greater than Vora. So give it a go. What Rajasthan? What do you have to lose by playing a younger, potentially better person? Like, makes no sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure. On the plus side, Shivam Dubé was good, and that was the positive I was going to get to. And Swarasi was all right. Ross, Shivam Dubé, did he do anything in this match which suggests to you that he might be better than we all thought?
Not really. No. like you've played with them, right? Like you've played in the same team as these people, where they will try to have. They'll talk a big game. They'll look like they're going to be good, and then they might hit one score above 35 in a season, and they'll ride on that kind of potential for the rest of the season, and they'll just record really disappointing 15s, and then they'll do a James Vince to slip, or they'll hit it to kind of square leg or whatever it might be. Unless he hits kind of 4 50s in a row or something, I'm going to continue to think that he doesn't deserve to be playing for Rajasthan Royals, let alone batting in their top 6.
Right, Ross. One thing, we're going to move on to Devdutt Padikkal in a second, but I know we've got a load of super chats. Should we get through them quickly so that we can move on and talk about Devdutt?
I would love to. So Moyak Bakchi has said, if Mumbai aren't as good, Chennai are old, RCB are peaking too soon, Delhi are not quite there, then the question is, who is actually any good in this tournament? So I mean, we criticise pretty much every single team because that's the fun of the podcast. But
RCB are really good.
Yeah,
they do look really good. There's not really anything you can get away from that. I think 5 matches is never enough really to judge teams. I think Mumbai will probably be fine as soon as they get away from Chennai. I still think Punjab Kings are not out of this. I think they've got obviously some wacky backroom shit happens there, but they have the capacity to put out a good 11 if they keep Bishnoi in the side, bring back Jai Richardson. They're starting to put together an 11 that in theory could win a few matches here, and I mean the best team by far has been RCB, hasn't it?
Mm-hmm. And then we've also got from Vic saying, good to have Dan Weston back, needed some eye candy. So there we go. Rick and Patel goes, should Rajasthan Royals be relegated in exchange for a county team? I mean, Dan, you're involved with Leicestershire. I mean, how would they fare in the IPL?
Better than Rajasthan. If we got 4 overseas players at least.
And then Abhishek's come in with, what would you give if Rassi van der Dussen changes the fortunes of Rajasthan Royals? I mean, if Rassi van der Dussen comes in and does that, we'll all sign this hat. We'll send it to you, Abhishek. That can be our promise to you. Darshan's come in saying that delayed mega auctions is causing havoc to the plans. That's true, but at the same time, the teams also had the opportunity to release certain players, and there was plenty of players who went unsold who would have improved quite a lot of these teams. And I think a lot of teams' auction strategies, mini auction strategies, were flawed, as we've talked about. Sunrisers Hyderabad had shut their laptop an hour before it finished. That is just the scale of what you can talk about. Just even pretend. Just pretend.
There was one team, and you could see on their laptop, they just had a count of how much money they had left. That was the only thing that they bothered bringing to the table.
Online banking.
Yeah. It was just I guess it would be really embarrassing if you kept bidding after you'd run out of budget. So you probably want to keep up on top of that to save face, but it's not genius, is it?
Mum, I need you to transfer me some funds. Is that okay?
Right, let's talk about Devdutt Padikkal because this was an incredibly striking innings. From my point of view, the amazing thing about it was the range of shots. I don't know. Have either of you seen it was about a 1-minute video of Babar Azam hitting a 4 all the way round the ground. It's cut from different matches. So it starts, he guides one down to third man, then it cover drive straight down the ground. There's about 50 shots. It's amazing. He hits all the way around. Devdutt Padikkal basically did that in an innings. We saw him clip through mid wicket to get off the mark. Saw him hit multiple sweeps off Gopal at the beginning of the innings. Guided one down to third man for 4, cut shot for 4. He hit a straight 6, he hit a 6 over mid-wicket, hit a pull for 6. A little bit later, we saw him break out the cover drive. It was virtually the complete innings. I think, so he was on 80 off 30 balls, slowed down because he was going to get a century, and I think probably wanted that milestone, which in the circumstances I thought was sort of fair enough. What did he get?
It's completely fair. It's completely fair. Oh, I think we had some people get in touch on Twitter saying, how dare he? How dare he? It's like, it's a walk in the park, mate.
I wanted to ask, do you reckon what do you reckon he could have ended up with today? I mean, 150 or yesterday, sorry, 150. He looked so good, didn't he, Ross?
Yeah, I think there is just that where people always talk about, the dearth of talent that India have available to them. But Padikkal isn't some kind of random player that people just say, oh my God, this guy's amazing. Padikkal has some serious potential. And it was great to see someone like that batting at the top of the order in the hardest T20 competition in the world, but much harder than some of the international cricket that he's played in that format. And he played really well. And you could only put the bowlers who are put in front of you around the park, right? But for any bowling attack, I think to hit a 50 ball, what was it? I was striking at 194, I think he was striking at. Like to strike at that was like extraordinary. And like you've got Virat Kohli at the other end, just kind of watching. Virat Kohli was a passenger in that innings, and he had the best view of everybody. Like how jealous do you have to be batting with someone who was just seeing the ball that way? It was a supreme innings, and I think hopefully it sets Padikkal up for a really good future, because I mean we're going to make some serious waves at that mega auction next year purely based on that innings.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think we're quite at the point where India team is in question, and I don't think that's really a judgment on Padikkal, but the amount of talent that India have got available and the number of guys who have proved that they're international quality. But Dan, I wouldn't imagine it will be too long before we see him playing for India, would you?
Well, I don't want to blow my own trumpet, but I think I will. And I actually wrote about Padikkal about a year ago in my book.
In your book,
this guy has
the hardback edition here, actually.
Yeah, so much ability. It's not even funny. His numbers at his age are just better than anyone's at a similar age. Like in terms of Syed Mushtaq Ali Trophy, the 50 over tournament, IPL last year, he had a solid start. Didn't explode in terms of strike rate, respectable-ish enough, but didn't go completely crazy with his strike rate. Yeah, he had that in his locker because you could see he had the highest 6% over the 2 seasons before inside Mushtaq Ali Trophy by a mile. So he's obviously got that in his locker. You don't just lose that, and I think we've seen that explosion in this particular match. And people talk about Kishan or Samson or Sky, who's gonna be the next big superstar of the Indian batting lineup in T20. I actually think this kid's got it all, and he's going to usurp them completely. He's going to be him and Pant are going to be the future of India in T20 cricket.
Well, you heard it here first, or maybe not here first, but you nearly first. You heard it here first.
You heard it here.
You did. You heard it here. Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because he did have a good year last year. He scored 500 runs, though his strike rate was well below 130. And I wanted to sort of ask you, Dan, whether it's common for young top order batters to significantly improve their strike rate. Is that something that is a trend or not?
I am wondering whether that's like a kind of a team orders thing as well, that he was told to be a little bit more responsible. I don't know. I might be wrong. I'm speaking for someone else here, but that's the possibility as well. Generally, what you see is that when young players step up in standard, they continue with their boundary hitting intent. They just get out more often. So the difference in standard is reflected in a lower balls per dismissal count than a reduced boundary percentage or strike rate. Certainly a notable reduction. And his last year was a notable reduction based on Syed Mushtaq Ali. Maybe it was team orders. Maybe it was nerves. Maybe he was kind of just trying to ease himself into the comp. I don't know. But yeah, now we've seen that he's been able to maintain that, and that, six sixes in 52 balls is obviously highly impressive. 17 boundaries in that 52 balls as well. It's about 30, just under 33% boundary percentage as well.
Cool. I think that was the sort of big news to cover. Obviously, Kohli was decent at the other end, but we talk about Kohli enough on this podcast.
There's one thing I need to raise. And that there was I reckon I saw 10, 15 tweets on it saying how nice Kohli was to give Padikkal the strike so he could get his century. That's just what a cricketer does. That's not what just Virat Kohli does. That is what every right-minded batsman would also do, unless you hate the guy at the other end, or even the bowler would just launch it down leg side, as we saw in the Big Bash earlier this year. So, I mean, Kohli, I thought played a great innings. If he's got a bit of form, we said he'd been struggling at the top. It was the right place for him to bat, Dan, as you talked about in the previews. And actually, it was good to see him part of the runs. And actually, watching RCB is really exciting at the moment. They do seem to have that plan. Harsha Patel has clearly got that role. And I kind of wanted to ask, what is it with medium pacers this year? I mean, Harshal Patel's the purple cap holder, I think, at the moment. You've also got Deepak Chahar for CSK, who's picking up the wickets with his medium pacers. Dan, what is it about the year of the average seamer that's taking the IPL by storm?
Well, it's another one of those things we spoke earlier about, like fielders and how coaches maybe overvalue fielding ability. They also, in my opinion, often overrate express pace in T20, and a lot of the time, particularly even in competition like Blast in particular, pace off is often ultra effective. We've seen a few 70-mile-an-hour bowlers end up going for the whole season with like 6.5 economy and stuff like that. And we're seeing this again here. There's like these pace off guys, the non-express pace guys are getting the decent economy rates, and yet these like 90-mile-an-hour merchants are getting smashed all over the place. So maybe it's again another challenge to that conventional wisdom.
Okay,
Right.
so we've got a couple more questions, Jack, if that's okay. So from Ricken, he asks, what is the perfect fourth overseas for RCB? I mean, are we all going to agree that it should be Finn Allen, or are we going to say that, or we said Daniel Sams is in there? Dan Christian had his opportunity, didn't really do what he was there to do. Kane Richardson and Zampa are also there. What are we thinking, gents?
It's a pretty tricky one. I'm going to defer this to Dan. We'll probably have a better answer.
The RCB king.
Yeah.
Chris Morris?
No, in Ali.
In all seriousness, Finn Allen for me. I mean, I like Patador's upside. He obviously didn't play in this game, but in the previous game when they played 3 overseas as well. And I'm like, you have Finn Allen in your team. You are allowed to pick him. This guy is like the most exciting, destructive top order batsman that I think I've ever seen in terms of numbers. So, like, just play him. I want to see him. I want to see him play.
Patrick Starr, who has sent me money before because they found me attractive.
Sexy,
so I mean, if you want to send us more, great. But isn't RCB's legacy that they stay top of the table for the entire season and then lose in the playoffs?
Yeah, it is, and I fully expect it to happen. But Dan, you should enjoy it while it lasts.
Don't break my heart.
And Vic comes in. Why isn't Shubman Gill firing at Sexy Dan? So I'm guessing that's to you, the man with a plan.
I think he's a bit too technically correct to be a really good T20 player, if that makes sense. The classical players don't have like high 6 percentages or anything like that. I just think that there's no disgrace in that. Maybe he's just more of a longer format player.
Mm-hmm. Fair. And then a couple of people have mentioned Mohammad Siraj and how well he's performing at the moment. The IPL really kind of giving RCB the kind of platform to do what they want with that bowling lineup, which I think is great. And the thing what also can't be underestimated is how having the likes of Kohli, Maxwell, De Villiers around some of those players like Padikkal, etc. Like that team looks formidable. It's looking really good at the moment. And I buy into what you're talking about, Jack, earlier, saying that 5 games is always quite difficult to judge teams on. And I think this is setting up as a really kind of exciting place to be. And Sunday's match sees CSK, kind of the inform oldies who seem to have found a way to play in this IPL versus RCB. That's surely the biggest match of the tournament so far, isn't it?
Yeah, but maybe not in terms of importance, because I think these two teams look like they have it together enough at this stage to probably make the playoffs. It's for these two teams, they've only played 4 matches, not even 5, but they look pretty good, pretty competent, pretty well organised, certainly in comparison with some of the others. But I think I think it could be the most high quality game. I don't know. It's quite a hard one to call as well. The old master, MS Dhoni, the also now quite old Fox, Virat Kohli. I don't know where I'm going with that. They're both old, aren't they?
Yeah, I think it should be a good game, and I think the IPL today is actually not disappointed. I would love to see more games away from the Chennai, the Cheapawk in Chennai. There is just something about it when I'm watching Ravi Bishnoi come into bowl and a crater just comes out the top of the pitch. I'm just like, it's not going to help the standard of cricket, but Who cares? We're getting cricket every day, so let's not be too worried about it.
Yeah, that is one of the things. Like, if you play low-level amateur cricket, they don't, as you move up the standards, they don't keep the terrible pitches that you play really low-level amateur cricket involved, because it's like, ooh, anything can happen. No, the quality gets a bit better so that the people with actual skills can display them. And I just don't think you get that at the Chipawk. But, like as we said on the last show, it's up to different individuals to call that, and some people love it for some reason, don't they?
Yeah, well, we're moving into the second phase now of the tournament, so we're going to see some change in venues, etc. So that should give a whole new kind of dynamic to what we're talking about, and look forward to talking more about the different pitches and the different venues.
Yep. Shall we wrap up the show for this week? We will be back. I think it will be Monday, so we're going to take a weekend off because Ross is away, Max is busy. I'm busy on Sunday, which is the obvious time to do the next show. So we'll come back on Monday. It'll be a bit of a long one, but it should be pretty good. Remember that you should subscribe. If you've been watching this, I can see there's 425 people watching. All click subscribe now. Boost our numbers. Make us feel good about ourselves. Hit join if you really like us. Or go over to our Patreon, which is how you can give to us directly at a better price than YouTube will offer. That's what it's all about. And finally, we're sponsored by Woodstock Cricket, who make premium cricket bats. And as Ross said earlier in the show, they are really, really good. Dan, it's been a pleasure having you on. I think you're coming on again next week at some point, aren't you? So,
Let's do it.
That will be good. Ross, you're off for a week. Enjoy your holiday. And I will be back Monday. Bye, everyone.
See you later.